dad to my two boys, one with autism. But before that, I was a soldier in the United States Army. And I saw my share of bad stuff. And I'm telling you straight from experience, the science comparing autism parents to a combat soldier is not an exaggeration. When I was a soldier, no matter how bad the mission was, there was always an after. You'd come home, gear off, and you could finally drop the guard. There was always moments in between the missions. But as a parent to a child with autism or any special needs, the battlefront is the home. There is no end of shift. When the crisis hits at 3 o'clock in the morning, my nervous system is in the exact same survival mode I felt in the service. They have shown where the cortisol level is the same or higher as a soldier in a wartime situation. But, I also got support in the Army. But parents like us often hear that, oh, it's just a phase, or you're spoiling them. We live in a state of alert 24/7. But to the parents who are standing on the line that most people couldn't even last an hour on, your stress is real, your exhaustion is real, and you are a warrior in every sense of the word. I've worn the uniform, and I've been up with my son all night long. And none of what I said is an exaggeration. It's a medical reality. So I just want y'all to know, I see you.
Recently, we came across a video from a father raising a child with autism that deeply resonated with thousands of parents, including us. His words describe something many caregivers have felt for years but struggled to explain. We wanted to know, is what he is describing supported by science? We asked 2 researchers who have studied caregiver health to watch his video and share what current research tells us about chronic caregiving stress and what parents can do to protect their own health.
Yeah, my initial response is just how valuable it is to have these communities of people sharing their experience online with other families, because I think it's so normalizing as well for people to just be able to see their own experiences and their own feelings when they're difficult feelings reflected back at them as well. I think that the experience that dad reflects on is very much borne out in my own research and also in the kind of wider body of research around just the impact of chronic stress on the body in general. So that is basically the fact that if you are experiencing physical stress, psychological stress again and again and again, your body basically goes into a kind of chronic stress experience, and then there is almost like a tipping point where your body just can't cope anymore. So it's called the allostatic load, I think. It's just basically that point at which your body goes, nah, I'm not having it, I can't do it anymore. And then you start to it's almost like your body is not able to process that stress anymore. It starts having a kind of longer term negative impact on your health. And we know that happens for loads of different stress causes, and you can see that in the biomarkers. So that's like the diurnal cortisol that you see in the body in response to stressful experiences and chronic stress in particular. But we additionally do see that for caregivers. So caregivers of parents, my research was mothers exclusively, but there is no reason to think that it wouldn't also be the same for dads, for parents, potentially for siblings as well, other people in the family in that close caregiving space. But that, of course, there is the additional load and the just like constant repetition of that burden and that stress as well. So we definitely would imagine that being a caregiver can and often is as bad for your health as any other sort of long-term stressful experience. But I would also like to always make it clear that when I'm talking about my research, I am very much talking about kind of people in terms of almost averages. I'm not talking about any individual's experience necessarily, because in the UK, we're very careful just to make sure that, of course, somebody can not feel stress as a caregiver as well, even though a lot of people do find it a very stressful experience.
Mandy, we wanted to hear what your thoughts were to that video.
So I think everything he said was accurate. I think that these parents, like he said, there's never an after with these parents. These parents are never off. They continue on. And with the research that I've done, I've looked at, I've worked with a lot of parents who have children with a variety of special health care needs. Some of them are technology dependent, some of them, so just not a specific condition, but all over the place. And these parents really have said, they're always on. They never get a break. Uh, and so I can see that when we do know chronic stress negatively affects our immune system and our inflammatory system, it makes people sicker more often because of this system, because of the issues with the immune system and chronic stress. And so oftentimes these parents are responsible for their children for their lifetime, depending on what the condition is and if it's long term or not. And so I agree with everything he said, 100%.
Like,
Yeah.
and I shared it with Michelle just because I thought, like, I felt validated. So obviously I wanted to pass it along and see if, anybody else, but it was like, but my question to you on this is, why do you think caregivers dismiss what they are experiencing? And is it common for parents to become so used to the stress that they no longer recognize how activated their
Yeah.
nervous system is? And that's almost two questions in one. So maybe if we just want to do the first one, why do caregivers dismiss what they are experiencing? Because I think we do. We just kind of blow it off like, oh, that's just life.
Yeah. I think it's exactly that. I mean, I again can't talk to, so my research didn't go into that specifically, but what we did see is that caregivers are more likely to have ill health, but they're less likely to go to the doctor about it. We saw that like if someone goes to the doctor, if a carer goes to the doctor, then they go as often as other people. But the difficulty is most getting them to go to the doctor in the first place. So we know that if we look at what we'd say GP records, so like when you go to your kind of first line of contact, doctor, that people are just like, there's bound to be an underestimation of the kind of scale of the issue in terms of caregiver ill health. And we think that just sort of from a human perspective, that's because if you're a caregiver and you're feeling stressed, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling anxious, you can kind of rationalize those away because of course you're in a situation where you're going to be feeling those things. So you're not going to go to the doctor because the doctor can't give you a pill to help you with your caregiving, can they? So I think a lot of people just like fall at that first hurdle because they just set themselves up for thinking the doctor can't make this any different for me. I would, of course, encourage people to have those conversations because the doctors can also often help with the other factors around it, like a lot of signposting support. But it is just recognizing, I suppose, that there's maybe stress that's above and beyond what you're able to cope with as an individual, and therefore that's where you need the help. And also, I found that you are more likely to have like exhaustion, fatigue, like chronic pain, maybe like musculoskeletal kind of symptoms as well as a caregiver. So those are also things that you absolutely should be going and seeing your doctor about. But I think especially on the sleep one, like we found that caregivers are fatigued. Of course, caregivers are exhausted. A lot of people who have children with disabilities, they're having lots of broken sleep, lots of stress. You're not going to be sleeping well. It's like a virtuous or non-virtuous cycle. So then you're not going to go to the doctor if you think they can't make my child sleep better, are you? But you still, as a caregiver, that's going to make you ill if you are not sleeping well night after night. So,
I think that's why everybody wants to feel validated and we want to make that point to families because that validation could be the impetus that they actually can represent themselves a little better.
So there's some discrepancy depending on the research, but pretty much all of the research kind of comes to the same conclusion that long-term stress negatively affects our physiologic processes as far as inflammation and immune function. So what happens like when there's an acute psychological stress activity, it releases like inflammatory markers into your body because it's like that fight or flight, right? And so those inflammatory markers typically will do this system where it's kind of a feedback system. So then your body will produce anti-inflammatory markers to kind of bring those back into place. With chronic stress, while there's some discrepancy between the researchers saying that like whether the pro-inflammatory the markers versus it decreases the anti-inflammatory markers. Some will say they both go down, and then some suggest that there's this habituation like phenomenon, like that your body becomes so used to being constantly stressed and constantly in this, fight or flight activation, that it diminishes that inflammatory response altogether. And so your body then, it can cause things like premature aging of the immune system. And again, so there's some discrepancies on what exactly happens with those markers, but it all leads to the same thing, that chronic stress is bad for your physiologic health long.
I know years ago something happened in my, like it was a traumatic, everybody was very upset and I was like numb because I'm used to, and she was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how calm you were. You just took that so gracefully. And she thought I was so graceful, but I was just like, I don't know. I was numb. And that sometimes my daughter will still say that to me now. However, saying that, I do jump at the smallest thing. Like my husband will come around the corner and my inside of my body just like I'm having a heart attack. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like, so, and that happened this morning. That's why I'm a little off today, but because he brought me a message and it was like, I jumped out of my skin. So I'm a little crazy, but like, what do we do about it? Is that kind of what you're saying? It's just because I'm numb, because I'm been under stress for so long that.
Right. And then you're at and that always waiting for that other shoe to drop, right? Or lack of a better, I've had issues with one of my children as well that, it's constant, like you're always waiting for that next shoe to drop, right? And so that's almost like PTSD response, really. That's truly what it is you're so used to be living here when everything seems like it's going normal. You don't want to jinx it, right? And so that's a PTSD response, truly. And that kind of goes back to that video, right? We have soldiers who significantly suffer from PTSD, but parents are doing the same thing. So this is initially going to sound a little weird, but self-care, right? We all talk about self-care, but we also know there are significant barriers to self-care. And one of the things that I learned from the parents that I've interviewed over the years is that self-care can look different depending on what you view self-care as, right? I have had multiple parents tell me self-care could just be sitting in your car for 5 minutes drinking your coffee with no interruptions. Or, it doesn't have to look like self-care that we're used to seeing, right? So it doesn't have to be that you have to go to the gym for an hour or that you have to follow this strict regimen, because oftentimes they can't do that. And so I think taking care of yourself, even if it's minor, like even if it's things that you wouldn't think of as self-care, I think it's really important to kind of incorporate even little changes into your life.
I mean, we always know that prevention has to be the most important thing, doesn't it? Is that when you start realizing that you're feeling really, really stressed and that it's having an impact on your ability to caregive, to look after your own children and to be the caregiver that you want to be as well, and to have the relationship that you want to with your children, with your family, with your wider support network, if you start to realize that you're kind of isolating yourself, then that is the point at which you need to start trying to seek help. Whether that is from a GP initially or whether that is reaching out and talking to the people around you, because we also know that there is a relationship between caregiver health and like the amount of social support and social contact you have as well. So social relationships are massively protective of your health. So we absolutely would be encouraging caregivers to kind of make sure that you protect as far as you can those relationships as well with the people around you, and keep trying to get out and maintain your hobbies and your activities. And I do recognize that that's very difficult, particularly when you're caregiving for, let's say, a child with significant, profound disability needs. But it is also something that's going to mean that you can caregive. And I think there needs to be a piece of work as well, just with that awareness raising at the kind of GP, at the doctor, at the healthcare professional and social care side of things as well, just that family-centered care around supporting the families and recognizing that, of course, it's a family unit. It's not just the child that needs support on their own. And I know in the UK that isn't standard practice because struggling services are disconnected and fragmented and they don't support the adults, they support the child, but I think just keeping on repeatedly chipping away at that, and us all kind of saying the same thing, and that there's that need to help families navigate this complicated system and not increase family stress through the complexity of it all, is something that we just need to champion.
We're here for you. Let's be here for each other.